Black Sabbath and King Crimson, two insane bands, very famous bands that been around for a long time, have many albums, a lot of lineup changes, and gave us crazy music. Both are considered, not just considered, both are very influential bands and innovators in their respective musical styles. In fact, not only innovators but generators or progenitors, beginners of their style. They both are considered to have started or been among the very first to have started their respective musical styles. King Crimson, of course, is considered one of the ultimate kings of prog rock, although they are way more than that. And Black Sabbath, of course, are considered among the founding fathers of heavy metal, or what eventually would become heavy metal. Both have pretty convoluted histories, especially in regard with lineup changes. And I think this is reason enough to put them in one segment or to compare them. But to me, the fact that I like them both is enough. So I get it that some people might think that this pairing of these two bands is strange, but it's not strange to me, even though the music is very different in many aspects. But there are also, of course, some similarities, little bit, not too much. King Crimson was founded mostly by Robert Fripp, who went on to recruit some friends that he knew before, and he was in a previous band that was doing mostly covers and not such advanced kind of music, but he was impressed a lot by the improvisations from jazz as well as classical music compositions, and he wanted to do something to that effect. Not all that different, at least in principle. In practice, extremely different. But in principle, this was not very different from the idea of ELP, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the second pioneer in progressive music, or what's being called, typically termed, progressive rock, although these terms are not always very descriptive or very precise. At any rate, although both of them had similar theories, in practice the bands went in completely different directions. And when King Crimson congealed or was formed, they played some live shows, and they were ready to release an album just a little bit before Black Sabbath. So we will start with them, and of course this is the timeless classic, the debut album, In the Court of a Crimson King. On one hand, we could sit here and talk about the record all night, but it would be much better to listen to it. And those who are not familiar with it should do themselves a favor and get the record, or at least listen to it digitally. It's great from the first note to the closing note. Incredible record. Every single song, if you can even call it, definitely not a song in the traditional sense of a rock or pop record, much more a composition in the vein of a jazz or classical composition, just with more complexity thrown in there. All the songs here are great. Epitaph, Moonchild, Talk to the Wind, of course, In the Court of a Crimson King, each one with multiple segments and multiple different phases going back and forth in the song itself. Sometimes more in the future, but the songs would be divided into more subsections. And of course the opening track, 21st Century Schizoid Man, just a great record. And contrary to a popular misbelief that people who are not super familiar with the band think that Bruford played on this record, he didn't. On this record it was one Michael Giles, whose brother had previously played played with Fripp in a band, and Fripp wasn't happy with the simplistic aspects of the band, and so he left to found King Crimson. As difficult as it may sound, they managed to follow up this record with another banger. And as we shall see, not just any banger, but a major banger, In the Wake of Poseidon. The only thing that you could say against Wake of Poseidon is that for someone who already heard or knows Court of the Crimson King, might know what to expect. And the central theme of King Crimson throughout their entire history is variation, is unexpected, things that you just wouldn't expect. Even if you're expecting the unexpected, you wouldn't expect this. But the only exception for this is Wake of Poseidon, which also happens to be my all-time favorite King Crimson record. I know, it's sort of heresy. You're supposed to say In the Court of a Crimson King, and that's their ultimate achievement, yada, yada, yada. I don't disagree with this, but I like Wake of Poseidon better. In my mind, Wake of Poseidon is, yes, it is Court of a Crimson King 2.0, that is true, but it's with improvement. So it's not like a poor copy, it's not like an attempt to duplicate it. It's just a very similar mindset. It was released very shortly afterwards with the same personnel almost. There was probably some personal changes, because that's the other theme that runs through the history of King Crimson. Personal changes all the time, almost. So again, In the Wake of Poseidon, an insane album. And in my mind, not only it is a King Crimson 2.0, but a King Crimson improved. King Crimson, not a Court of a Crimson King, I'm sorry. Not necessarily on steroids, but on a little bit better worked, better finished, more precise, better worked out, better production also. Again, a banger from beginning to end. They started on this record what they would do fairly often in the future, meaning taking back a musical theme and a title and making numerous part of it, taking it up at numerous points in the record. So they started this here on this record. Cadence and Cascade, obviously mind-boggling number. Of course, In the Wake of Poseidon, the title track, Cat Food, the Devil's Triangle, which is here broken down into many sub-segments, 3 or 4, that they would keep doing throughout their history. And of course, Peace, which is the beginning theme and then comes back over and over again. So overall, great record, and anyone who likes In the Court of a Crimson King will, in all likelihood, like In the Wake of Poseidon. Next up, they release a record entitled Circus. And in my opinion, it was a circus. It belongs in my least favorite Crimson records. I never got through to this record, so to speak. I've listened to it. I had it about the same time that I bought most of my King Crimson records. I used to have them all the way up to Discipline for sure, and I probably had the next 2 afterwards also, if I'm not mistaken. That was a while ago. But Circus somehow never spoke to me. I never connected with it. I always hated Happy Family. It sounded such an idiotic song to me. It's not terrible, but to me, it's just it's a wrong turn in the history of King Crimson. Again, superlative musicianship, insane compositions, insane playing, great ideas, but somehow to me it just doesn't do it. I don't like it. I don't like this record, never did, and maybe in the future I will, but I don't. With the following release, Islands, they totally redeemed themselves. Even though there are a lot of similarities, but if you will, you could call Islands Circus improved. Pretty much like for me they did with Wake of Poseidon. Just a bigger step. And yet not enough to propel Islands into my top big favorites. However, of course, the title track is insane. And then you have the letter, Sailor's Tale, For Mentor Lady, the opening. That they're all good and they all have their moments, but still not super perfect. I love listening to this record, but it's not among my biggest favorites. And with this record also an era for King Crimson ends, an era both personal wise and both music wise, if you can say such things. Maybe not everyone will agree with that. Typically King Crimson is broken down into their three periods. The first period, which goes from King Crimson to the end of the Wetton era, which is 70 something, early mid 70s, 74 maybe. Yeah, 74 I think. And then there is the 80s, and then the mid 90s to 2000s. But let's give him a break here and let's go see our friends Black Sabbath, who very shortly after Court of the Crimson King released their first record, Black Sabbath, a timeless classic. Again, Black Sabbath is to heavy metal in a way what Court of the Crimson King is for prog. Again, it's another album about which we could sit and talk, maybe not all night, but half the night. This is way more simplistic, obviously, than Court of the Crimson King. And in my very heavy, not so humble opinion, this record is a little overrated, overhyped. Yes, it's the first record of Black Sabbath. This is what started it all. It has some insane songs, but I think it's being trumpeted a little bit higher than it actually is. If you think about it, the songs that everybody knows from here and that are always being played are, of course, NIB, the title track Black Sabbath. A lot of people know The Wizard. And then the rest are pretty much covers. Evil Woman is a cover of some unknown band. Warning also is a cover of Ainsley Dunbar's previous band. And then you have Behind the Wall of Sleep and Sleeping Village. So I don't know if they wanted to signify that they fell asleep at the wheel. The songs are not bad, but they're not incredible. They're not really memorable. The one that's most memorable of the album is Evil Woman and Play Games With Me, which was kind of a rocky, poppy sort of half-joke song by a relatively unknown band, at least unknown to me. I don't know how famous they are. But again, great record. I love listening to it. But Behind the Wall of Sleep and Sleeping Village tend to get sometimes boring and meandering and you lose your concentration. The Warning's not bad at all. This is produced by Roger Bain, who became famous by being the producer of this record. They were a young band with not a lot of support and they didn't have a lot of studio time. And you hear this record. So another parallel with another band called Judas Priest, who are of course also considered progenitors or innovators of their respective musical style. So while this record ranks very high in my top Black Sabbath records, it's not the number one. Next up, they released Paranoid. I would say that it's probably their single most famous record. Paranoid has known and singable songs from start to end. Of course, you have Iron Man, War Pigs, the title track itself, Paranoid, Electric Funeral. And then again, like in the first record, you have songs that are a little bit less known, a little bit more obscure, but they are better in a way than Wall of Sleep and Sleeping Village. You got Planet Caravan, Electric Funeral, Fairies Wear Boots. That's another one that's pretty known. So it can be said that it beats its predecessor, but on the other hand, the raw, let's just say, brutality or that animal brute musicianship of the first one is kind of lacking a little bit lower here. So this to me is a little bit, ranks a little bit lower overall. But again, I'll do the ranking at the end, so let's leave it at that. Next up, they come out with something mind-boggling, and that's Master of Reality, one of my all-time favorite Sabbath records. It sounds so good. It's so great. Whatever was missing in the first two, they fixed here. The production is insane. No, it's not insane, but it's the little progress in production that they did here. And if I'm not mistaken, they were more involved in here with the production, the band themselves. They managed to fix, and that little step in whatever was going on with production made this record just a big step better than the first two. You got those two instrumentals, the introduction to Children of the Grave, Embryo, great piece. Of course, to be Into the Void, that's the riff of riffs, in my opinion. That's kind of like the biggest riff maybe in history. I can only imagine this playing the intro to Into the Void, the main riff, playing in an arena. It's like, it's the riff of riffs. Lord of this World, another great one. Embryo, like I told you, Children of the Great, Sweet Leaf. Okay, the opening track is good. It's great, but it's not a banger. They could have put maybe Into the Void or Lord of this World instead of it, or maybe After Forever. So great record, great sounding record, great everything. Bill Ward here kills it. They all do. Really great record. And next up, again, they knocked the ball out of the park with this. This came out of left field, kind of. Volume 4. It's almost like they did a little King Crimson listening, and they left the intentional, the purposeful, brutish simplicity of the first three records, and they came out with a record that is not progressive by any means, but kind of borderline, has some progressive and jazzy flares and flavors onto it. Get Tomorrow's Dream, Supernaut, Wheels of Confusion, Snowblind, Cornucopia. Great record, really. Has a few weaker moments. Has a few jazz-ish kind of improvisational songs. I don't know how much they were rehearsed, how much they were actually improvised and recorded on the spot, or maybe somewhere in between an improvisation that was then recorded. But some people criticize a later album for going into jazzy territory, and yet they don't criticize this one. But this one ranks super high. This, I think, should be in every Sabbath fan's top 5 probably. Great record. And they follow up with Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, another great Sabbath record. A step back, in my opinion. They have great songs, and in a way it's like almost like a watered down volume 4, or not necessarily a watered down, but a volume 4 made a little bit more listenable, more accessible, more suitable for radio. Of course, the title track, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, is very famous. Bruce Dickinson covered it. Killing Yourself to Live, the opener of Side 2, is another one. I love The National Acrobat, Spiral Architect, Looking for Today. That's another famous one. Who Are You, Sabracadabra. Good record. The sound could be a little bit worked better. Great musicianship. Overall, a very good record. But again, what did you expect me to say about Black Sabbath? That I don't love it? Obviously, I do love it very much. Next up comes a very, very, very special Black Sabbath record, my all-time favorite, Sabotage. Such a great record. It's as if they combined Volume 4 with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, injected some Master of Reality in it, and just worked on it real good. Everything is perfect on this record, kind of. The balance, the sound, the song, Super Czar, Am I Going Insane, Hole in the Sky, The Rid, Megalomania, Symptom of the Universe. So cool. I love the album cover, this madness of the mirror that reflects it in the same side, kind of crazy. Just an insane, unbelievable record. I should get a better copy. I had this copy since I was a kid. It's gone on 40 years. Same thing with the older ones. Anyway, I just can't say enough good things about this record. And this record also, sadly, unfortunately, closes an era in the history of Black Sabbath. Here, ironically, they were at their worst in terms of their personal situation. Health-wise, they were all stoned to living bejesus out of their heads. They were on crack and cocaine and LSD and schmLSD, whatever drug you can ever imagine. And their manager cheated them. He told them that they're getting money, and he was stealing all the money in the meantime. Everything was written in his name. So pretty sordid story. And in the end, Ozzy Osbourne ended up marrying the daughter of this manager who screwed him over. So now they're doing good, but back then they were so stupid that they didn't even understand that they were being robbed. But anyway, that's the sad and disgusting, frankly, aspect of not just the music industry. Every industry is like that. Whenever they can screw you, they screw you, and wherever they can steal from you, they'll steal from you. The only thing is that music is entertainment, so it's out in the public eye, and people know not just the musicians, the players, but people know the producer and the record label and so on. So it's a little bit more in the public eye, and there's bigger money involved with successes, with rampant runaway successes. So of course all of these things, cheating and stealing and backstabbing, is just brought more into the public eye. But I don't think it's very different from any other industry. It's just corporate America or the corporate world. I'm sure it's no different in other countries. But anyway, let's say goodbye to Black Sabbath for a moment, and let's bring out another interesting and weird King Crimson record, Lark's Tongues in Aspic. I never ate this delicacy. I am not sure what lark tastes like. It's probably not even legal to hunt or to take lark. Typically these kinds of game don't taste good, but I would gladly eat normal beef tongue in Aspic. Be it as it may, very, very interesting record. Many Crimson fans have a either love it or hate it kind of attitude towards this album, and I can understand both. And I actually have or do both. I love it and I hate it, and that depends a lot on when I listen to it. Very often I listen to it when I don't really want to hear it, and then I hear it and then I hate it. And some other times I just let me just revisit this. Let me just hear this. Very moody, crazy kind of record, what one would call experimental. Although when this was released, this is 73. I think the term didn't exist, experimental, but they do a lot of the beginning of that kind of music that's almost Steve Reich kind of attitude mentality. So doing more truly experiment, more rhythmical, mathematical experiments than actually playing the instruments. They play, of course, a lot. From this point on, I think that the King Crimson works, they're not really individual songs. They have to be listened in a context of a full album. Of course, that there might be exceptions here and there. Easy Money is the one, the famous one and the listenable one here. The Talking Drum, it's kind of not bad, but they drag you out, and this is also going to become a characteristic of King Crimson, especially later on in their third era or third kind of period. Just building up this song slowly and doing like very monotonic repetitions, like mainly with the bass and drums or synthesizers. So it's difficult for me to say whether this album is good or bad. It's both. It's good when you're into it. It's good when it's great musicianship. It's insane musicianship, but it's not like beautiful or great songs that you can sit and enjoy and headbang to it. Lock Song in Aspic Part 1 and Part 2. The Talking Drum, like I told you, Easy Money is the easy one, Book of Saturday and Exiles. A lot of jazz style. You can hear that they've been going into the Miles Davis, John Coltrane kind of idea, and then taking that world and superimpose it with very technical playing and drumming. And personal wise, this signifies the arrival of the one and only John Wetton, who immediately became a full-blown member of the band, very assertive, took part in the production and making the music and writing the music. He was one of the co-writers of Easy Money. And you don't super hear it, but if you listen to it, you can hear it. You can meet Wetton through this record very early on in his career. Before that, he was with Family and Mogul Thresh, and I don't think he had worked with Brian Eno yet, but both him and Fripp would go in separate times to work with Brian Eno, who is an interesting character in and of itself. Be it as it may, after Larkstongues in Aspic, they released one that, without a doubt, without hesitation, is a great album. Sort of coming back to Court of the Crimson King and Poseidon and Islands. And they release Starless and Bible Black. Of course, the title song is a great composition, and then you have Fracture, which would come back in a different way later on in the future. And the first side is also very good. You got the Lament, of course, the famous song, Will Let You Know, The Great Deceiver. Again, going in the very technical, very mathematical rhythms with the drums and the bass, but also making nice, good, beautiful, enjoyable melodies. Of course, always incorporating their madness and their science, let's just say the science part of music. But again, the big ones are, of course, side 2, Stardust and Fracture, and side 1 is also well worth a listen, especially Lament. Great record. And from this record came the most, or the best known song from the next record, Starless, which came out on Red. And Red is the record that I think, I have a feeling that it kind of, at least subconsciously, it had the desire to fix Islands. Right, I told you about Islands, that I I liked it, of course, way more than Circus, but Red is shares a lot of similarities with Island, but fixes them, right? Of course, the big famous song is the Wetton composition, not Wetton, but Coke composition, Starless. That's the one that he always played, both with UKs and with his reunions. And of course, there's another big song from the record, Providence, which is another great improvisation back and forth kind of between the band. Fallen Angel, Red, of course, the title track, very, very famous, has a very characteristic melody and theme. So again, a huge record, and the one that seals from a personnel and period-wise closes the Wetton years, and also the first King Crimson era, King Crimson period. Not before they release USA, a live record. It's not the first live record, but this is the one that's normally mentioned as a very important live recording, and there's a lot of improvisation, a lot of changes. Of course, they do 21st Century Schizoid Man. Of course, they do Easy Money. They do some improvisations. They do Lament. They do Locked Tongues in Aspect Part 2. Very, very worthwhile record. So you can make the case that Wetton really recorded 4 records with King Crimson. And interesting observation, the album sleeve shows a hand stretched out to the air and holding something, looks like a silver ingot or a piece of bar stock of steel or aluminum, and the band's name and the title of the record is on it. And looking at it in post 2007, 2008 eyes, it looks like someone at a concert holding up a smartphone. So pretty prophetic or poetic. But I read somewhere that the inspiration for that was the Statue of Liberty. But anyway, here fairly sadly ends a big chapter of King Crimson. They are going to be silent now for quite a number of years, until Fripp decides to revive the band. And so let's go and check what's going on with our friends, the Drunken Bozos, Black Sabbath.